I'm Linda Holzer, and this is the biography discussion for The Heart of a Woman, The Life and Music of Florence B. Price. I'm coming to you live from Pyramid Art, Books, and Custom Framing in Little Rock, Arkansas. We're in the historic Dunbar neighborhood where Florence Price once lived. Today, September 12th, would have been the date of the Dunbar Community Festival. However, due to the pandemic, that has been put on hiatus, and so we are thinking of this book discussion as a way to celebrate the Dunbar community. We've read the book, this long anticipated book, and now we have a chance to share with each other. As far as how we're going to do this as a virtual book discussion, it's been suggested, and I think this makes a lot of sense, that whoever unmutes first has the floor. And I just ask that we do our best to be attentive to one another so that there are many opportunities for sharing. I've provided reading guide questions, but I don't intend for those to be used in any particular order, just a way for us to think and share. I would, however, especially be interested in hearing from Professor Waits about her reaction to finally having this long anticipated book. Professor Waits, if you would.
Thank you so much, Dr. Holzer. Yeah, it's just this has just been a really incredible journey for me because Raylinda Brown and I were very close friends during the time that she worked on the book, and even before that. We met back in 1985, and to be able to read her bio on Florence Price is just an incredible experience. You know, there are a lot of things that, unless they're actually written down, we never get to find out exactly what women like Florence Price have gone through, the struggle, the obstacles that she faced. Everything that she did in order to get her music heard was brought out so well in Raylinda's description of her life. And I found the examples also really quite interesting, because she really covered a great deal of material. The concerto, the piano concerto in one movement, the 1932 sonata, some of the spirituals, just and so well written. One of the things that I was impressed with also is that this is not a book that is esoteric in terms of language. You know, you can sit down and read it just as you would a novel, although it's not a novel. It is written in such a way that anyone can appreciate what is being said about this wonderful composer. And I think that was what resonated with me more than anything else, along with, of course, the incredible amount of work that Raylinda did to actually get it done. It was not, I have to say, it was not an easy journey. There were lots of struggles and obstacles along the way, and I was so excited and so pleased when her sister, Carlene, gave that wonderful presentation to, you know, when the book was released, because it really described in so many ways everything that Raylinda went through in terms of getting all of this done. And we talked about all of that, by the way, in our long friendship, because she had always had in her mind something that she wanted to say about that. And I think it's important also that we need to know that there are women of color out there who are creating and making art, but unless their stories are written down, no one is going to know about that. It's really critical that this material be archived and read and heard. I feel so strongly about that, because a lot of that history has just gone into the dust. I just have to say that. And this is a really important book. I think. Certainly one of the most important, and the very first one on the life of Florence Price. So I couldn't be happier that this has been done. Thanks.
Thank you so much. We have a special performance to share with you of a song by Price. And Anna, if you would cue up that video, that is Hold Fast to Dreams, performed by Dr. Louise Toppin.
And before I start that, definitely want to just give the floor really quick to Garbo. She is on the call. Go ahead and introduce yourself and talk to us about the Dunbar Neighborhood Festival that should be happening right now.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're so excited to have you on this book discussion. I am Garbo Hearn, Director of Pyramid Art Books and Custom Framing and Hearn Fine Art, and excited to work with Linda Holzer to bring this work, this literary work, to the forefront. We were able to release it, and now to have actual book discussion is to bring it forward. Dunbar High School, now currently Dunbar Magnet Middle School, is directly across the street from our gallery and bookstore. And cross street is two streets over where Florence Price lives. So we're in the heart of where Florence Price got her beginning, and we're very excited to be here. So thank you all for being here today.
All righty. So I'm going to cue up Hold Fast to Dreams by Florence Price. This is performed by Dr. or Louise Toppin? Give me 1 second. Okay.
Brava. Dr.
So I'm going to make the link available in the chat if that was like too choppy for anyone. You can definitely experience it on your own time. So I will put the link in the chat.
And so now I open the floor. What would you like to share in response to your experience reading about Florence Price? What one thing surprised you the most as you read the book?
Just a note that most people are unmuted. So if you are trying to talk, please unmute yourself.
I would change it. Read the book. Okay. Dr. Brown's book. Hello. Hello. This is Dr. Hazel Lee. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry that I have not read the book, and the reason why I am listening today is because I want to learn more about Florence Price. My sister is Dr. Cynthia Cosette Lee, and she is a classical musician. In fact, she was the first Black woman to graduate from the University of Pennsylvania with a master's degree in composition. So and she studied with George Crumb and George Rockford. But I'm trying to learn more about Florence Price's experience and how she was motivated to compose in the midst of intense segregation and intense level of racism, yet she was able to compose such a fantastic music. So I'm interested in her motivation.
Excellent. And I think one of the things that comes across from listening just to that short example of a song, an art song, is that Price was a virtuosic composer. There's a moment in that song where there's a high note that anyone with lesser technique would really struggle to carry off. And Dr. Toppin sang beautifully. The song was very expressive and beautiful, but it requires advanced technique, and that's something that has struck me about Florence Price's music. Whether it's symphonic or art song or solo piano or chamber music, it requires advanced skill. Did anyone consider what were the influences that shaped Florence Price as she grew up in Little Rock? And keep in mind, Little Rock in her day would have been a city of 38,000 people.
Hi, I'm Akiko. I'm a conductor, and I'm a recent transplant to Arkansas. I'm in the city of Conway, not too far from Little Rock, but I really enjoyed the book. I've conducted her first symphony, but nothing else, but it made me want to conduct her other works too. Speaking of influence, I was struck by the fact that she and William Grant Still, the other most famous African-American composer, went to the same elementary school and had the same teacher, although they were a few years apart. I was blown away by that. And I did not realize that, I forgot what exactly the phrase was to describe the environment of Little Rock, the Black community in Little Rock when she was little was, but I think he had the word paradise or something very positive in it. And I was blown away by that. You know, before there was this moment in the history of Little Rock where there was such a renaissance of the Black community and culture. And I was just blown away because I didn't know that, even though I'd been visiting Little Rock and Arkansas for a long time. And I always sensed Hazel asked, what motivated her to do all this despite everything. But I think for all of us musicians, whatever our circumstance are, we always, it's not easy. She had it even tougher than most of us, but I think her kind of inner automatic, response to wanting to be creative was really apparent. It was really clear in like from the first bar of the first symphony that I got to know, but I feel like it's, Dr. Brown's book really ties it all together, like her spirit of just like, she just has to compose and she has to create and she has to engage with other artists, no matter what, or within her circumstance. I thought that was really amazing. So,
do we have any people on the call today who are from Little Rock? Okay, because if not, I'd like to share something that I learned from someone who grew up in Little Rock. Dr. Sybil Hampton shared with me when I first met her a year ago at an event where Issei Barnwell sang at an interfaith event. She shared with me, oh, you're interested in Florence Price? Florence Price and I attended the same school. And I thought, whoa, that's not something you hear very, if you talk to someone about your dissertation topic, that's not something you typically hear in response. And what Dr. Hampton made me aware of was, okay, yes, Florence Price did attend segregated schools growing up, but look at how far she was able to go. And what does that say about the quality of instruction she and her classmates were receiving at segregated schools? Because, she graduated from high school at the age of 14. And it says so much about teachers like Charlotte Andrews Stevens and Carrie Still Shepperson that they made sure that their students were exposed to a curriculum of breadth and depth, that even someone who graduated at the young age of 14 had experienced the sort of learning that enabled her not only to get into the New England Conservatory of Music, but to succeed and thrive there. And Dr. Brown points out the fact that young Florence Smith graduated with 2 undergraduate degrees was uncommon. Everyone didn't do that. And the fact that she did it in 3 years, to me, that suggests she was incredibly driven and focused, and she recognized the sacrifices her parents were making to enable her to study in Boston, and she absolutely made the most of it. And I think any of us who feel guilty about the expense of our education, because I know I did. I'm the oldest of 4, and I was very conscious of the fact that my parents were investing a lot for me to be able to go to Northwestern, and that I couldn't use it all up because I had siblings.
I'm gonna ask.
And
So we were collecting.
the impression I get is that Florence Smith was very aware of the sacrifices her parents were making, and that's part of what drove her to achieve so much in a short time. I see we have a Little Rocker who has just joined. Hi, Pat. Would you care to share about what influences shaped Florence Price as she grew up in Little Rock, and what influences shaped your life in Arkansas? Is that something you would care to comment on?
Unmute. Okay, I'm just learning this technology. Can you hear me? Okay. Well, I didn't even know she existed until Ernest Lamb did the special on her when he was teaching down at University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. And the thing that's most important to me is that we can share her with students that are coming up that are interested in music, to let them know that there's someone that looks just like them that's from, you know, Little Rock, or grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, that went on to do great things in the area of music. So I use it as a motivator from time to time when I run into children that are interested in music. And of course, they're just like myself. They had no idea that she even existed.
Drawing on another question from the guide, are you surprised to know that William Grant Still is comparatively well known and respected, while Florence Price's story was relatively unknown and untold until recently? How does this make you feel? And what lessons are there to be learned so that young women who desire classical music-related careers can pursue their dreams and be successful? Would anyone like to comment?
I'm sorry, this is Skip Nicholson. Actually, one of the things that surprised me, Akiko made me think of this, one of the things that surprised me in the book and was the two things about it. First, the amazing amount of work that Raylinda Brown obviously had to do because, as she says, Florence Price was such a private person in the sense that she didn't have the documents, the letters, I mean, I have a fake background behind me so that you can't see the rubbish in this place because I'm completely the opposite. When I die, people are going to know a lot more about me than anybody cares to think. But evidently, Raylinda Brown really had to dig to get to some of these things. And what the link here between these two is to your question about William Grant Still, was what to me was that almost tragic story of the letters not getting delivered, so that friendship had years when the two weren't talking to each other. And I wonder if there had been more communication there, is the answer to your question because he's a man and she's a woman and that's why he got more attention than she did? And if so, if they had been closer personally, might that have made some kind of difference? And that's a question that doesn't make a lot of sense because, you know, you can play what if for a long time, but I worried about that when I was reading the book.
Other thoughts?
Well, I think in the book also mentions the fact that she wasn't very good at self-promotion. And I don't know much about William Grant Still as a person, but seeing how organized, you know, his publisher and like kind of the state is now, and aside from the gender aspects, he might, I don't know, maybe he was more kind of enterprising that way, who knows? But I did wonder about that. But I think she did admit, or the book admitted, that she was a little shy about that. So he might have contributed, not to excuse the lack of spotlight on her music, but.
One of William Grant Still's comments in the book, I'm going to read it. My association with people of both racial groups gave me the ability to conduct myself as a person among people instead of as an inferior among superiors. And this is not to say that Blacks had no worries. To the contrary, beatings of Blacks by white people, even by policemen, were not uncommon. So that gives you a little insight into William Grant Still's personality and his feelings about growing up in Little Rock at that time. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Could I maybe piggyback on that? Yeah, I think everybody probably on the panel is aware that, of course, racism and sexism, wherever you were, whether it was Arkansas or on the East Coast in the South or on the West Coast, women had to really struggle to be twice as successful or twice as good, shall I say, even though men were recognized. I mean, I'm not saying that they were immediately successful, but obviously racism played a big part in that, and there may have been some concern on Price's part about whether or not she could, even though she was certainly extraordinarily gifted as a composer, as a musician, as a pianist, as an organist. I mean, she had all of those qualities, and that was certainly evident in what she did at New England Conservatory and even beyond. But I think obviously racism, if you really look at it, and of course the fact that women were never recognized even though they had been composing. I was thinking about Clara Schumann, who was one of the great virtuoso pianists and artists of her generation. Probably had it not been for her, a lot of her husband's music would not have been heard across Europe. You know, Clara concertized, she performed his solo works, his concerti, and did all of that. I'm not saying that that Robert Schumann was certainly, you know, not a great composer. I mean, his music speaks for itself, and it's being heard and performed all over the world. But she did a lot to make that possible. And women were never recognized, I think, for centuries as having anything significant to do with composition. I have to talk about it really from a personal point of view too, because when I went to Yale, I was the only Black woman in my class in the early 60s. And I must say that, you know, you have to, because you're carrying that particular burden, if I want to call it that, you have to prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that you are just as good as the next white student who is right there beside you. So I've had firsthand experience with that, and of course Raylinda did as well. You know, she went to Yale. We didn't graduate at the same time. We came in at different times. But what I'm trying to say is that when you go into an environment like that, you are judged, I should say, a little bit differently, and you have to prove yourself beyond any shadow of a doubt that you are just as good as everybody else. Now that picture, of course, is changing, but it took a while for all of that to, how shall I say, you know, come full circle. And Yale is not the only university where that kind of thing happened. I mean, I went to segregated schools in the South as well. I grew up in New Orleans, and all of the schools when I was growing up were segregated. So you have to really look at that in terms of Price's struggle. Even though she was able to overcome a lot of that, she was also denied many things because, not only because she was a woman, but because of her race. So I just wanted to bring that up. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Other thoughts?
Well, I was blown away by the fact that when she applied to live in the dorm at NEC, her mom made her put down her background as Mexico because she felt that identifying herself as being, you know, a Black person from Little Rock, Arkansas would be like, I don't know. I think she lived off campus, but when she registered for NEC, I think she had to put a fake origin, you know, per advice from her mom. And I was blown away by that her mom felt that was important. It's a terrible thing. I mean, to not be able to say where you're from. You know?
Yeah.
Rob, did you have?
I was thinking a couple things, a little tangential maybe. From earlier comments, I was impressed at how motivated Florence obviously was as a child. Obviously her parents set high standards for her, and she, you know, lived up to that all through college and all her time in Chicago too. It just seemed like she hit the ground running. She was accepted in, you know, that women's club of organists immediately. She was the first Black member of that. You know, I should say I work at a music college, Vandercook School we're in Bronzeville, just on the IIT campus, basically in Chicago. So I'm close to all that stuff all the time, and I'm tempted to swing by some of the addresses when I read about them just to kind of get a feel for it. But and then comparing her to William Grant Still, I kind of wonder the other thing, how did he manage to succeed where so many others haven't? And, she got pretty far under the circumstances, and she survived and, lived through a lot of challenges, kept finding a way to provide for herself. But I was also curious, did Raylinda get a chance to meet Florence's daughter? She lived long enough to donate some of her papers to the university, right? But then others were still in that house that was found dilapidated, so she didn't donate everything. And I wonder what all happened there, and did anybody have a chance to talk to the daughter, I guess more specifically, about what her mother, felt or thought through the years? I know there's some of that in the book, but I always felt like there has to be more.
Well, that's a really good question, and I'm not absolutely certain. I know that in the book, Guy Ramsey talks about the fact that it was 1979 when Raylinda Brown encountered, as a work study in the library, those boxes of uncatalogued materials. And if I remember correctly, it was 1974 when Florence Price's daughters donated her papers to the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville. And so that would have been a 5-year difference, and I don't know enough about the family circumstances to know if down the road, once Raylinda was working on her dissertation topic, if the daughter was still alive. I had jotted it down somewhere about when each of the daughters passed, and it's what the semester is like during the pandemic. Some things are just falling, from the memory. But that's a good question, and I'm not certain.
Hi, this is Kathy Irvine. I'm at Cal State San Bernardino. Hi, Althea. I think you were
Hi.
our Pioneer winner last year, one of the Pioneer Award recipients. Nice to see you. And I'm with Pat Boykin. I haven't read the book yet. I had a colleague who introduced me to the material, so I've been rooting around on the web and doing my own research. But I'm wondering, does the book, two sort of questions or things that kind of stand out. Is there information in the book about her years at Clark College and what she was doing there? I know that's a very short little period, but there's reference in the online materials to that particular experience and how foundational that was. And the other thing that strikes me that I'm looking forward to reading in the book is what happened with her relationship to Margaret Bond, because so often I think in the history of Black women we find these kind of I'm thinking of the S Club of writers in Washington D.C. with Charlotte Grimke and that gang of folks that all found a way to sort of be together. And so her connection to Margaret Bond, who it seems just from the little reading that I've done was kind of a cohort, helped her to feel more fiercely, righteously about what she was trying to do in a world that clearly was dominated by male composers. So if anybody can talk to how the book speaks to that, I would really like to hear that.
Absolutely. I just checked the index. Clark University years are discussed pages 64 to 67. And my recollection is that there's some very interesting detail. When I did my dissertation, what there was to go on was articles here and there. And none, or very, very few, of the concert pieces were published at the time I did my dissertation. And then Raylinda was able to get Schirmer to publish the sonata. And the image that came to mind for me in '98 when the sonata was published it was like a refrigerator fell from the sky in the middle of a field. And it just kind of stood out because it's almost 30 minutes long. It's a magnificent big work. But that couldn't possibly be the only piece that's just the only concert piece that was in print at the time. And what's been fascinating in recent years, especially since the cache of manuscripts was rediscovered in that abandoned house in St. Anne is that now we have a much wider range of kinds of pieces, and it opens up so many interesting possibilities for programming. Because, as a performer, you're not going to put a 30-minute piece on every program you do. Sometimes you will, but not that's long, that's big for the audience for a solo recital. And now we have short pieces and intermediate length pieces and some long pieces to choose from. I would suggest that anyone who is looking to draw comparisons between Florence Price and her contemporaries, it's fine to start with the obvious, like Aaron Copland and George Gershwin and William Grant Still. But what you really want to do is look up Eleanor Remick Warren and read about Eleanor Remick Warren and notice her background and her training and her publications, and then think about how different Florence Price's experience was. And the reason I did that is I was performing a concert with a colleague, and we were doing some song sets and some solo piano pieces. And we were doing a song by Eleanor Remick Warren, and I was writing the program notes. And in the course of doing that, it was very instructive to see the difference. And, spoiler alert, Eleanor Remick Warren was white and was born to a wealthy family in Los Angeles. And that opened certain doors for her at an early age. And it meant that when Eleanor Remick Warren passed away, a much higher percentage of her concert pieces were available in published form. So just putting that out there as something to ponder. Are you interested now in learning more about classical music and or listening to Florence Price's compositions? Thoughts?
Absolutely, for me. I mean, I can't wait to do different, maybe her Symphony No. 3 someday. Not that I've mastered No. 1, but, I understand that those are two really different works. And the first symphonies have, a lot of influence, like that sound like Dvorak or, very, of the time. And I understand that the third symphony is a much more mature work within her own oeuvre. So I've heard, some stuff on YouTube. I think the Yale Symphony Orchestra has a recording of it, but I'm looking forward to kind of digging my teeth into that more.
It's not a simple matter finding recordings, and I owe so much to Althea Waits for issuing a recording in 1987. That's what introduced me to Florence Price's piano music. I had never heard of the composer. I found this recording being advertised in the classical section of a women's music catalog in North Carolina, just by chance. And I was actively looking for a dissertation topic. And I thought, well, I was thinking in terms of, is there someone who's an American woman composer whose music interests me, that I would want to spend a lot of time with the music, because a dissertation takes a lot of time. And that was really the only criterion I had. So I ordered the cassette and I listened to it and I thought, oh yeah, this is really beautiful music. Okay, fine. But there were not, if that catalog had not advertised that cassette recording at that time, I would not have come across Florence Price, because there were not a lot of other people recording Price's music at that time. From 1987, the next real milestone of a recording of her music was 2001, when the Bay Area Women's Philharmonic recorded, I believe it was her first symphony. And now in the age of YouTube, we have more things available, but I mean, some pieces, the ink is still drying on the freshly published scores. And the piece that I'm going to perform next by her is the piano quintet in A minor. Well, no one had recorded it. And it's another big piece. It's almost 30 minutes. Thankfully, very recently, within the past 9 months, the Apollo Chamber Ensemble recorded it. And it's available not as a CD, but it's available on YouTube. They shared a link to that performance through Price Fest. And so I think what you'll find if you're looking for recordings of the composer's music is you have to be willing to sleuth a bit, because the whole process of making recordings and having funding to do that is complicated. And if you're working in academia as a classical musician, funding has been very dear in recent years. It's become much, much harder to get. There are fewer grants available. And so it's more common that people might do a concert recording and put it up on YouTube than embarking on a CD project. And now that it's a file sharing world and CDs are something that it seems like it's really only in classical music that people even consider doing that. It's not a simple matter to find recordings of pieces. Thank God for those algorithms that help us on those browser searches. Yes, Althea, please.
Yeah, I'd like to share, kind of piggyback on what you were just saying too about how difficult it is just to get music recorded. I mean, we do have YouTube, thank goodness. I mean, a lot of this music has been done via live performance. That's how a lot of recordings get out. But even to get funding, I have to say that had it not been for Cambria Records and Lance Bowling and of course Raylinda, she was the one who gave me a copy of Price's manuscript for the 1932 sonata, which was in the Library of Congress. And had we not started out that way, becoming friends, and then when I told her about my interest in this work, it would never have happened, because I was always curious about, well, what was that all about, and then trying also to negate some of the stereotypes that some people have about Black people in general only being connected to jazz, blues, and gospel music, and that we don't do classical music for some reason, and that is certainly not true. That is not the case. But I owe a great debt of gratitude to Raylinda and of course to Cambria, because what happened is that Lance Bowling, who is the CEO of that small company, called me and invited me to record. And because I certainly wasn't going to get any support from the universities that I was connected to. And it is not easy to get funding. I will say that again, it is very difficult. Foundations like New Music USA, the Doris Duke Foundation, I mean, they're all out there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your grant application is even going to get a hearing. I mean, you can certainly apply, it doesn't mean you can't, but it is very, very difficult and very challenging, regardless of what you do, whether you're a conductor or composer, a performer, it really doesn't matter. So I wanted to bring that up because it's so important that you know that. And also, one more thing, going back to what Linda was saying earlier about Eleanor Remick Warren, I had the pleasure of meeting her. She lived in Hancock Park in Los Angeles. And Lance Bowling, bless his heart, invited me to her home for tea because I recorded 3 large piano works on another album that I did. And she was, of course, a great pianist. And we had a coaching session. And I will never forget it. I mean, we spent a couple of hours with me at the piano and she's saying, giving me all of these instructions on how her music should be performed. And it was absolutely a wonderful experience. I just wanted to share that bit with you. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That really sheds light on the process, on what it takes to record a composer's music?
I think there's some good news a little bit and Althea can help me with this. I think here in the West on KUSC, which is a long time classical music station that I have on almost all the time, and I don't know how much of Price's music I had heard unaware of what I was hearing, but of course since I read the book, I've become much more attuned to it, and they have been playing something by her every day in the last week because I've been watching knowing this was coming up, and two pieces brilliantly played by guess whom, from Black Diamonds. They've played two pieces. So she's getting a good deal more play here. I keep hoping somebody will record the organ pieces because that's something that I particularly like. Or maybe we can get the Fujimoto version of the Third Symphony. That would be wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
That's marvelous. Thank you for sharing. Let me put this out there. Florence Price was a very private person. If you could meet Florence Price, what would you want to ask her?
I'm dying to know what she would think of this diversity, equity, and inclusion movement within classical music, and especially in symphony orchestras. It is a huge issue. I think a lot of major orchestras now have a committee dedicated to it, comprised of musicians and administrators and maybe board members. And I just saw that the San Francisco Symphony just created some sort of scholarship opportunity for emerging African American composers, and they get mentoring by composers and conductors affiliated with the San Francisco Symphony, including the music director. And I just wonder what she would think of everything that's happening now, and especially in 2020, And if anybody, Althea or anybody else, would have any clue as to what, Florence Price would say, I would love to know.
Okay. Stay in touch.
Other thoughts?
Hi, this is Pat. I would like, if I could have met her, I would like to know, how did you get started? What was happening when you began to write? I know you can't put a time frame on, but how long did it take you to write this piece? What was going on in your life when you began to write that piece? Just some motivation, some encouragement, or either, a private side of her that I think would come out when you begin to question her about her love of music, her quietness as it related to not being well known with her pieces and everything. And I think that would just be the meeting of a lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
This is Dr. Hazel Lee. I should also have introduced myself, as I am a librettist for my sister's operas that she has composed about African American experiences in the United States, of course. But what I would, as being a close relative of a person who is a composer, a classical music composer, who is facing right now all the dynamics of the racism and the sexism and things like that is going on in classical music, I would like to ask Ms. Price about her inspiration, how she maintains her inspiration in spite of all that is going around her, all that is happening around her. She's able to create this beautiful, wonderful music. And I would like to talk to her more on her personal relationship to her music. That's what I would like to find out more about.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
Hi, this is Jasmine. So I haven't read the entirety of the book, so I might be missing some information, but knowing her private nature, it'd be interesting to see if there were some pieces that she would have liked to keep private. Maybe that influenced some of the publishing decisions or things like that, I guess.
Yeah, that's very interesting because we're sort of mining her papers, and there was never that time where she was taking her concert pieces and proofing them with a publisher and making decisions about, yes, run this, no, don't run that, you know, that process. I'm very glad you shared that, Jasmine. Other thoughts?
I'd like to ask a question of the audience. How do you think Florence Price would be received today if she was composing?
Good question. How do you feel that Florence Price would be received today if she was composing?
Wow.
I think she would be extremely popular, actually, her music and herself, because her music is virtuosic yet very accessible. Yeah, I mean, I think she would be very well received. So I think going back to like what we were talking about at the beginning of our discussion today, all the opportunities she probably missed out on because of racism and gender and all that stuff, you know, I think one of the things she was severely lacking was an advocate in some of the crucial ways, like publishing and proofreading and, you know, presenting her material to certain people. And I think as long as she can find a good advocate for her music, I think her music will be very well received, because I find kind of this indomitable spirit in her music, in the, you know, just even without knowing anything about her gender or race, I think kind of like with Beethoven, there is this incredible drive, intensity that I really love. And I think that'll catch on with people quite easily.
Yeah.
Please, Althea. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think her music would be well received, of course, in today's climate. I mean, granted, there are always going to be obstacles. I think that's just part of the human experience. You know, if you live long enough, you're going to run into things. But I think now the tide has been turning in a very, very positive direction. I mean, I don't think we're relegated to just hearing only certain types of music. I was thinking about all of the crossover recordings that I've heard over the years, you know, classical musicians who were in their little, you know, playing all these big concerti, and they're doing jazz and everything else. I was thinking about Yo-Yo Ma, for example, and his projects. He is absolutely legendary in terms of his way, you know, virtuoso cellist, extraordinary musician, but he certainly does not put himself in only, you know, one category. He does all kinds of music, and I think certainly Price would be well received in today's musical community in this climate, because now we're really a lot more open to that than we would have been in the past. And going back to what Akiko just said about Beethoven, yeah, there was that incredible drive, you know, that spurred her on as Beethoven. You know, the idea that you don't give up, you just keep you keep pushing, and eventually something will develop and come out of that. And I think Florence Price had that in her spirit. You know, she was encouraged early on, you know, to be successful and to achieve. And I think, in spite of all of those struggles, she was able to get her work out there. And she did have support from people who really recognized her talent and her gifts, you know, and I think that's what we all need, of course. We all need an advocate or somebody who is interested. I certainly have had that in my career, because I don't think any of us would proceed to say, well, we can just do it alone. That is not the case. You have to have people who are interested in you, and you rely on that to get the support, whether it's financial or being a mentor to somebody. I mean, all of those things come into play when you're working toward achieving a certain goal, regardless of what discipline, what field you're in. So.
That's an excellent point. I'm reminded of something that happened for William Grant Still that was a tremendous advantage, and that is that the conductor who premiered his first symphony, the Afro-American Symphony, was Howard Hanson, who was also a composer. And Howard Hanson understood that what needed to happen for William Grant Still's piece was that it needed to be performed a certain number of times in order to be able to interest a publisher in it. And so I can't speak for Howard Hanson, but he did seem to consciously make a decision to advocate that piece to help it get published. And once that first symphony was published, that opened doors professionally for William Grant Still, having that first symphony in print. And my understanding is Howard Hanson not only premiered it with the Rochester Philharmonic, but he took it on tour with him to Europe, and then it was performed on some guest conducting stints within a year of the premiere. And, you know, I'm a Chicagoan, born and raised. Florence Price, her symphony was premiered by the Chicago Symphony. I mean, come on, the Chicago Symphony. Creme de la creme. Fabulous. But Frederick Stock didn't take the piece on tour and was not thinking the way a composer would think. So, I mean, I can't know for sure. I don't know what his calendar said for 1935 into 36, but the evidence suggests that he was not thinking in terms of, I want to help this woman get her symphony published. Whereas it does seem to be the case that Howard Hanson was taking steps that he knew would result in William Grant Still's first symphony being published. And the interesting thing was, Florence Price, after William Grant Still had his breakthrough, and she had hers, Florence Price, there is a record that she reached out to Howard Hanson and sent him some of her scores, but she kept what she received in response, and it was a dictated but not read letter, where, you know, Howard Hanson acknowledged receiving the scores, and his secretary signed it, and that was it. And, you know, unfortunately, that would be why the outcome of it took decades before there were published scores of her first symphony and other things. Well,
and I asked the musicians if my thinking, and I'm not a musician, is that it's a much rockier road in classical music. In popular music is always looking for something new, and there's a constant push for new things, for new sounds, for new. Classical music can drop. Beethoven and Brahms are more popular probably today than they were during their own lifetime. There's a huge store of things for an orchestra to put together a concert. They don't have to look for anything new. They know they can sell tickets. Just throw on some Wagner and a lot of noise. I don't mean that Wagner is only noise, but but I mean, there's a huge, very popular among the people who like classical music, a huge store to draw on, whereas pop music doesn't have that. And there are the crossover people, like Dr. Waite was saying, with the Yo-Yo Ma's and the Wynton Marsalises, but there aren't a whole lot of those. I don't know, is it harder in classical because of that huge backlog that's still very popular?
I think things are changing a lot, though. The audiences are changing. They're graying. The old audience that would have bought all those tickets are younger. Well, yeah, well, younger audiences are not as interested in that, and I think they're all clamoring for new stuff now with orchestras. The Grant Park Symphony every summer always has new material. I've done some Florence Price. We know Stacey Guerra, the composer. They just did one of her new pieces. They know they have to do that if they're going to keep drawing a crowd, because their old crowd isn't going to be around forever. So I think that's happening, and I think Florence would have been more successful than ever today because of that.
Yeah.
I also feel like I was thinking about, I love her piano music. I love that organ suite and the classical stuff. And then I feel like maybe she just responded to the market, what opportunities there were, what was needed. You know, when she first landed Chicago, she needed to teach. So she wrote a bunch of teaching material. And when she was in college, she probably, she got a lot of attention from, what was Chadwick? Everything at the New England Conservatory helped her thrive. And I bet she spent the rest of her life trying to work out ideas that she had discovered when she was in college. I don't know, but I'm just guessing. And then if I were asking her a question, I'd like to ask her about her relationship with Marian Anderson, because clearly she found an audience for her songs and she was able to, get those performed. It's pretty neat. She just seemed so capable of doing so many things, and when there was a need, she rose to the challenge. I feel like that's pretty cool.
This is Dr. Lee again, and I am really enjoying everyone's viewpoints. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and your opinions about this great woman's life. But I would have to say that I think her music would not be as popular, as well played, unless she had a lawyer, a agent, a conductor, orchestra that supported her. So I think that the support mechanism, publisher, she didn't even have a publisher. So that support, that if she was lacking that support mechanism, then I believe that she would be just like in all the rest of the composers that are unknown, because they do not have the support that you need, that you do need the publisher, the lawyer, the agent, and the orchestra and the conductors, and you have to have that type of support. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That's a very good point. I find myself thinking about how Ellen Zwillich's primary publisher is Presser. And having a publisher that you're closely associated with surely makes a difference. Other thoughts?
I wonder if Price would be writing movie music now. She was so good with mood.
She was. And she played organ at silent films. I'd like to share something in closing. My colleague at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, Dr. Laverne Bell Tolliver, is a retired professor of social work, and she introduced me to the term kujichagulia. The term comes from the originator of Kwanzaa, Dr. Malama Karenga, an ethical philosopher. It is a Swahili term that means self-determination. To define ourselves, name ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves. Through the biography of Florence Price, Dr. Ray Linda Brown is providing kujichagulia for the composer. if you'll give me a moment, I'd like to walk to the piano and play a closing selection. This is Florence Price's piano solo, Dreaming.
While Linda or Dr. Holzer is transitioning, I just wanted to let you all know that we still have copies available of the book, and you can definitely order one if you'd like by responding to the email that you got with the Zoom details.
So. I'm not hearing. Oh.
You know what? She's muted. I hope she didn't mute.
Yeah, I can't hear her.
I've let her know that she's muted. She should be notified that she's muted.
Okay, and give the gallery a call.
Yes.
Okay. She completely forgot.
The age of Zoom.
Right. We didn't hear anything.
Take two.
Take two.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Linda. And thank all of you for participating in this book discussion. And I hope that you will be ambassadors for the book, The Heart of a Woman, because this story needs to be told in every music department in the United States and abroad. So please share with everyone you know. And in Arkansas, we're going to work on getting a documentary made about the life of Florence Price. So this is not the last you've heard of us. So thank you so much. And Linda, do you have any closing words?
I don't. Thank you so much for gathering together and sharing your thoughts. Blessings, everyone. Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Linda.
Thanks,
Wonderful.
Linda.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this.
Thank you. Pleasure to see you again, Skip.
Everybody stay safe.
I'm so sorry that I forgot to unmute myself. I didn't see it on the screen, and so I assumed it was unmuted, and well.
You just got a little warm up.
Yeah, you got a little warm up and nobody left the room. They were patiently waiting, like, tell her it's unmuted. So I think it went pretty good, don't you?
I do. I'm really pleased. Thank you so much for suggesting that we do this.
Well,